Okay. On the podcast, the Assembly of Silence Radio Hour, my guest Josiah and I discussed the concepts of the real versus the ideal. And after recording it, I noticed something rather interesting. Now, on the screen, we have the prenatal and the postnatal. So if this is the first time you're seeing this, then you got to go get the basic idea from the beginning, the trigram theory, and a sense of what the two arrangements of the bagua mean. Not going to go through all that right now. In some ways, you could say that the real represents some objective reality, things as they actually are. But we are never quite able to really get the real. Our experience is always built upon ideation. And maybe I shouldn't say always. Our experience is ordinarily built upon ideation, because we can't really come to a concept without reducing experience. We have to filter all the many signals that we get. We have to filter all of the signals, because to try to process all of them is too much. And a lot of the signals are essentially background noise, or at least we can't do much more with them than treat them as background noise. Even though they may be of some significance, we can't determine significance if everything is important. So if all signals are treated as being significant, then there is no such thing as a significant signal. Everything becomes noise, and we can't make sense of it. And on some level, that's what the real is. The real is all of the things occurring. And we get signals about what all those things are. Well, you could say we get signals locally as to what all those things are. So chaos theory says, yeah, the butterfly flapping its wings in New Mexico is going to affect everything on the planet. Now, we're not going to feel the butterfly flapping its wings, but in the aggregate, all of the things that are doing whatever they're doing, whether it comes down to the movement of galaxies, the movement of planets, the behavior of stars, all the various things happening on the largest scale, and then the very smallest things happening, all of this aggregates into the phenomena that's occurring. And it really wouldn't be the same phenomena if any of it were different. It may not be noticeably different, but it wouldn't be the same. So it all fundamentally comes together as one phenomena, and that's what we call the real. But we cannot think about it in any specific terms. We can only get this kind of general picture that there is something like that, which, I guess some people would say maybe out there. I would be more inclined to say, yeah, there's a real thing going on. We just don't have access to it. And then there is the realm of the ideal. I have the word idea here because, well, it fits better. Let's see if I can express why. So ideology, ideas, the ideal, the image that we get of what the real might be about. So the way that we discussed it in the podcast is that this ideal state is not ideal. I mean, unfortunately, what I want to say here is that the ideal is real and that the real is ideal. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but let me see if I can express the logic behind that. Let's say that the real is actually the true thing. Like, I kind of think of it as being equivalent to an absolute reality, the Tao, which is, but which we cannot perceive. And then we have the ideal, which is the various ideas that we have about what's going on. And on some way, that's what we're functioning from. It's what gives us the capacity to make some sense of things and to communicate with each other, and for all the kind of things that we do in day-to-day existence, which is not being. That's kind of the very definition of existence, right? Everything that we do in existence requires that we have some idea of what we're doing. So in some sense, that's what's going on. That's real. That's the real experience happening. But we kind of know that it's limited, that this is not really what's going on. We know that what's real is something that's beyond our experience, beyond our understanding. Now, we can have a taste of it. So it's not entirely beyond our experience. It's beyond the normal range of what happens within the postnatal. Because in the postnatal, we're taking the material world for being real, when it ain't. Because there's something far grander that we cannot understand. And the more that we look into the material domain, the more we realize that we really don't quite understand what the situation is, and that there's something beyond the limits of our understanding, and that is more elemental than what we can grasp. And so the tradition says, well, you empty yourself from all your ideas, and that's what gives you access to the reality, and that reality is abiding in emptiness, because once an idea about what it is arises, well, then you've lost it. And you're now noticing something and turning it into a symbol. You're abstracting. You're removing yourself from the direct mode of being, from presence. And so you could say that on some basic level, the real has no attributes that we can assign to it, because it's beyond. That's why it says that the Tao which can be named is not the eternal Tao. That's real. But we're caught in a world of ideas about what's going on. So there's this incredible inversion that's built into the entire setup here. They are inextricably opposite, leading to each other. It's very much like taijitsu, the taiji symbol. They slip into each other because, from the point of view of embodied mortals, which is what we all are, we don't have access to what's real, to the ultimate reality. We have only the reality we're living in, which is not reality. We're living in a world. We're living in a set of ideas that are limited and that are not entirely accurate portrayals of what's actually going on. And we're continually struggling to try to fine-tune our ideas, but they're always not quite adding up, because you cannot capture what's real. So in a certain sense, it's really just a little bit of a word game, because the words real and ideal have various associations, but it strikes me as being kind of amazingly profound that we can say that there is an absolute reality that is fundamentally only an ideal within us, because we are living in a reality of ideals. So all of the various things that we construct are mental constructions. They are not real representations of what's real, but that's the best we've got. So it is real to us. And because the real is beyond our grasp, and we can't ever really touch it except in the sense of letting go of everything that we have, then on some basic level, the real always remains an ideal. You know, I can see how it might be difficult to make sense of these words because there's a fundamental contradiction that I'm trying to highlight. And the reason I'm trying to highlight it is that, you know, if you can loosen yourself from the idea, loosen yourself from the idea that what is necessary is a particular type of consistency in order for things to make sense. And recognize that opposition, look at the opposition, particularly like in the prenatal. Opposition is fundamental to what's real. These are conjugal opposites. They fit together like hand in glove. And that's what's real. We're living in an incommensurate conjugal universe where light and dark, magnet and dielectric force, probably most fundamental physically, and the Hegelian dialectic, where you have the abstract and the negation, or sometimes called the thesis and the antithesis, that this fundamental opposition is a real characteristic of the universe that we find ourselves in. It's not just an idea, although it is an idea. It's an idea that points to the real more than anything else. And now you could say that these are artifacts of the real which cannot be perceived behind them. In other words, we're talking about states of mind where the code is about what's going on in a mind, the state of consciousness. So we have the sense of the phenomena. We have the marks that are kind of etched into us, which is what memory is. And we have this imaginative capacity, which is creative, which is basically the generation of the ideas, of the images. So in the prenatal world, we have this world of opposites balanced out by each other, which is to say that they are states of mind that neutralize each other and return to emptiness. And so that is the dissolving of the ideas, in essence, that brings us back to, let's say, reality. It brings us back to what's real. The neutralization of the states of consciousness. Now, in the postnatal, the only opposites are in this primary vertical axis. Here, south at the top, north at the bottom. All of the others are absent their opposite across from them, which is not to explain the order of them, it's just to explain that this is a condition where the mind states do not balance out, and where one is trapped within the various mind states as you go around, let's say, the cycle of karma. As you go through the path, your mind is grasping, clinging to some notion. Okay, did I express this well enough? I honestly don't know. I'm going to try saying it one more time while I'm here to see if I can, because now I've made the case that there's a basic underlying contradiction and inversion that is at the core of sentient being, an experiencer, a node of consciousness within the phenomenal world. We experience a slice of existence, just a little part of it, and we get some idea, a feeling, an image of what it's about. And we cling to that idea, and in some respects, for so long as we're operating within that postnatal, day-to-day, trying to get what you want out of the world, struggling to survive, rooted in sensory experience, for so long as we're wrapped up in that, that's kind of our reality. That's what's real. It's actually happening to us. It's the truth of the situation, even though the ideas about what's going on are pretty much by definition inaccurate. Whereas, if we're over here in the prenatal, which is beyond our knowing, which we cannot form ideas about, which we can only become absorbed into. In other words, the sense of self dissolves as you get closer to being real, which is exactly what the Taoists say. And so, for those of us who are in the postnatal, that's just an idea. It's not real. So I guess let me clarify it one more time. I'll refine this to one greater level. Within the context of the postnatal, the real is an ideal, and the ideal is what's real. It's the only thing that's real. That's the situation we find ourselves in. Because this is normally where we are, right? But if we are somehow or another able to dissolve the self and experience the neutralization of the thought objects so that the mind, as Patanjali says, becomes like a clear crystal without any defect from within. You're purely receptive. That's what Earth is saying. And so you receive the conditions of the cosmos down to the finest detail. That's the theory. And I'm saying that because, it's a theory from the postnatal point of view, but it's a reality within prenatal being. So you could say that the path, the gold elixir, the holy grail, the true meditation technique is one which dissolves the self and returns the real to the real and the ideal to the ideal. Or a better way of saying it is that reality stays with reality, which means not knowing, empty. And that's why you could say there's a good argument against Ken Wheeler's problem with the whole Atman issue, where he says, well, they never said there was no self. Here's the problem with that. I think he's right, but from the point of view of the prenatal, when there is no distinction because thought objects have been neutralized, you cannot say there is a self. When there's no distinction being made, you cannot make a distinction between self and other. Now, is that technically saying that there is no self? No, it's not. It really isn't. All it's saying is that you cannot say that there is a self because you're in a condition where no distinctions are being made. So I would say that Wheeler is correct, but he's missing a very important and very fine point. So in the prenatal, if it's fully realized, the real is real, and the ideal is just a bunch of ideas. But in ordinary life, the contradiction confronts us because we have no access to the real. We're struggling with our ideals, our ideas, our ideologies, our conceptions. And that is what is real to us in this mode of being, in the postnatal, taking the material world as being real. And why shouldn't we? When you're experiencing it, that's pretty much what's going on. We're all trying to make sense out of it. We're all trying to do what we need to do. We're trying to figure out how to make a better situation out of all of it. And it looks like we're not doing a great job with that, really, in the aggregate. We're kind of making a big mess of it, truly. We don't have the right idea about what we need to be doing in order to bring about the results we want. We're burning like fire in order to try to produce what we want out of this world, out of our lives, out of each other. And we always realize that it kind of is empty. These aspirations, these ideals, these ideas that we cherish, that we live on, our ideologies, they keep ending up as hollow husks. And the ideal, you know, that word is, it's one of these words that's got a bunch of different meanings to it. So when I say idea, it has a different set of connotations than when I say ideal, but they're very much related. You know, you have the Platonic solids, which are kind of perfect forms of ideation. You know, you can think of them as being things which don't really manifest themselves in reality. But actually, the Platonic solids do a pretty good job of describing basic elemental structure, the kind of lattices that form with atoms that create solid materials tend to form either the tetrahedron, the cube. So there is a way in which those are very fundamental to the building blocks of reality. But the connection with reality that we dream about, the scientific holy grail of a pure objectivism, is in essence an ideal that we can never reach. And so from the postnatal condition, the real is an ideal we can never reach. And the ideas are our reality. And that contradiction, that basic contradiction, can only be resolved through the sublimation of mind objects and the disintegration of the sense of the individual. That's the restoration. Heaven as the guide. Okay, this has turned into a long video, a whole bunch of ideas, more ideas, if you find all this stuff interesting. And really, how could you not? Well, I hope you will consider doing various things. I recently started a Substack. So in addition to like subscribing to the whole YouTube thing and maybe writing a comment and hitting the like button, all that kind of stuff, if you want to follow what I'm doing, I think the best way is to sign up on Substack, taijireality.substack.com. You can just sign up. If you want, you can support me with some cash, but it's not necessary. And I'm going to be using that as a way of kind of being a clearinghouse for all the various things I'm doing, the podcast, all this stuff. I got some papers I've written, and I'm going to be doing a meeting for people who do support these efforts. So if this stuff is something you want to talk about, there's the opportunity to get together on a monthly basis and hash various things out and see what we can kind of clarify or open up. Or maybe, you know, there will be things that get discussed that make things even more confusing. And I have this terrible feeling that that may have been what happened during the course of this video to some extent. But I think that if you really follow it along, yeah, I do have this, you know, maybe it's a somewhat arrogant sense that what I'm doing makes sense. So I got to stick with that. It makes sense to me. I'm just not sure I'm able to express it all that well, but I will keep trying. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for thinking about all this stuff, and I hope you find it of use. Adios for now.